Don't let somebody else label you or tell you what you can't do, or, make you feel like you're at a disadvantage, or you didn't get it, you're not strong enough, big enough, talented enough, good looking enough, you don't have a great personality. Listen, they're underestimating you. You got to go out and, hit the ball out. You got to go out and use your gifts.
For a quarter of a century, Joel Osteen built one of the largest faith empires in America on a single promise: your best life now. Tens of thousands filled Lakewood Church every week. Millions tuned in from around the world. They believed this man held the key to happiness. He had survived storms before. A mysterious $600,000 theft. A controversial COVID relief loan. The fury of Hurricane Harvey itself. But on the afternoon of February 11th, 2024, a gunshot echoed inside the sanctuary. The image of perfection cracked, and for the first time, millions of viewers were forced to confront a colder truth. Behind the eternal smile, things may never have been as flawless as they believed. How was this empire built? And where were the first cracks? The answer begins long before Joel Osteen was born. The floor of an old feed store. The story of Joel Osteen does not start with Joel Osteen. It starts with his father, John, and a decision no one in the family understood at the time. John Osteen was born on August 21, 1921, in Paris, Texas. He became a Southern Baptist minister before he turned 18. He earned a bachelor's degree from John Brown University, a master's from Northern Baptist Seminary, and later a Doctor of Divinity from Oral Roberts University. On paper, he was the model Baptist preacher. His private life was less neat. John divorced his first wife, Emma Jean Schaffer, while serving as pastor of Central Baptist Church in Baytown, Texas. They had one son, Justin. In 1954, John married Dolores Dodie Pilgrim. For a Baptist minister of that era, divorce was a stain that did not wash off. 4 years later, on May 11, 1958, their daughter Lisa was born. Doctors diagnosed her with a condition resembling cerebral palsy. They said she might never walk. John did not turn to his Baptist colleagues. He turned to something his denomination forbade. He prayed in the charismatic tradition and asked for the baptism of the Holy Ghost. Months later, Lisa began to walk. John never went back to the Southern Baptists. On Mother's Day, May 10, 1959, he opened his first church. It was not a religious building. It was an abandoned feed store on the northeast edge of Houston. The floor was still streaked with dried mud from years of livestock. The air smelled of feed and manure. 90 people came to the first service. They sat on old wooden chairs. John knelt on that floor and named the church Lakewood Baptist. A few years later, he dropped the word Baptist. By 1979, attendance had passed 5,000. On March 5, 1963, John and Dodie's fourth child was born. They named him Joel Scott Osteen. 40 years later, that boy would stand inside a 16,800-seat NBA arena and preach to millions. But at the time, no one could have guessed it. The fourth Osteen child, unlike his older siblings, had no interest in the pulpit at all. The man behind the camera. In the Osteen family, everyone preached. Mother Dodie preached. Sister Lisa preached. Older brother Paul went into medicine and became a vascular surgeon in Little Rock, Arkansas. Youngest sister April Simons became a motivational speaker and author. Joel was the exception. In 1981, at 18, he graduated from Humble High School and enrolled at Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to study radio and television communications. 1 semester later, he dropped out. He returned to Houston in 1982, not to preach, but to work behind the camera. For 17 years, from 1982 to 1999, Joel directed and produced the televised broadcasts of his father's sermons. He helped build KTVU-TV 55 into one of the largest independent stations in the Houston market. John Osteen's broadcasts reached nearly 50 countries. Joel traveled with his father on missionary trips, even as far as India, always behind the camera. Whenever John asked him to preach, the answer was the same: "That's not me." Around 1985, a small errand changed Joel's life. He walked into a jewelry store owned by a woman named Ilof to buy a watch battery. Behind the counter stood her daughter, Victoria. They married on April 4, 1987. They had 2 children, Jonathan in 1995 and Alexandra in 1998. During those same years, the family produced a story that would become Lakewood folklore. In December 1981, after 20 days of hospital tests, Dodie, then 48, was diagnosed with metastatic liver cancer. Paul, still a medical student, was the first to notice her jaundice. Dodie refused chemotherapy. John knelt at her bedside and prayed, "Lord Jesus, I need her. Her parents need her. The children need her. The church needs her. And you need her too." 44 years later, on July 30th, 2025, Dodie passed away at 91. Paul Osteen later told the Washington Times that he had personally examined the scans and biopsy results. He called it a miracle. Dodie's healing became part of the family identity. Lakewood was not just a place where sermons were given, it was where the Osteens told their own story. And through it all, Joel stayed behind the camera. Until January 1999, when everything changed in a single week. His father's shoes. In early January 1999, John Osteen was hospitalized for heart and kidney problems. He called Joel and asked him to preach the Sunday service. Joel said no. A few minutes later, Joel called back. He said yes. On Sunday, January 17, 1999, at 35 years old, Joel stood before 6,000 people at Lakewood. He was shaking. He needed something to hold on to, so he wore his father's shoes. John was not in the building. He listened to his son's first sermon over the phone from his hospital bed. After the service, the nurses pulled Joel aside in the hallway. They told him, "We have never seen your father so proud." He just beamed with joy. 6 days later, on January 23, 1999, John Osteen died of a heart attack. He was 77. Joel later remembered the moment in a single line. "What were the coincidences of me speaking the last Sunday of his life? Because he was healthy, for the most part." Before the funeral was over, another thought arrived. Joel felt he was supposed to take over. He also felt the idea was absurd. He recalled later, "Every thought said, 'Are you crazy?'" On October 3, 1999, Joel was formally installed as senior pastor of Lakewood Church. Victoria was named co-pastor. The first 3 months were a disaster. Joel tried to preach the way his father had: loud, fiery, intense. But he was not John. He was a quiet man who had spent 17 years behind a camera. The imitation fooled no one. Then one day, he read a verse about King David. David served his purpose in his own generation. Joel said he heard a voice inside. "Joel, your father served his purpose. Go be you." From that day, he stopped trying to be John Osteen. He became Joel Osteen, the smiling man who spoke about hope, who never raised his voice. And Lakewood began to grow at a pace no church in America could match. From feed store to basketball arena, the 8,000-seat sanctuary. John, built in 1988, soon became too small. In December 2001, the Houston City Council approved a 30-year lease between the city and Lakewood Church. The property was the Compact Center, a 16,800-seat arena where the Houston Rockets had played since 1975. A former NBA arena was being handed to a church. Lakewood paid $1,880,000 in prepaid rent for the full lease and spent about $95 million more on renovations, largely funded by a $100 million Bank of America loan. They sold their old building to New Light Christian Center Church for $15 million. On July 16, 2005, Lakewood opened the former Compact Center as its new sanctuary. Around 56,000 people attended the grand opening, with Texas Governor Rick Perry as a guest of honor. 5 years later, on March 31, 2010, the Houston City Council voted 13-2 to sell the arena to Lakewood for just $7.5 million. A former NBA arena on 7 acres beside the Southwest Freeway changed hands at a price many in real estate called impossible. By December 2023, Lakewood had paid off the entire $100 million loan. Joel stood on stage and wept as he announced the church was debt-free. The moment was streamed live to millions. By then, Lakewood was no longer just a church. It was a media machine with 4 English services and 2 Spanish services each week. Weekly attendance between 43,000 and 52,000, 368 employees, and an annual budget of about $89 to $90 million. Its television program alone cost $25 million a year. Joel Osteen was no longer the boy behind the camera. He had become a global brand, and much of that began with a book. The pastor who took no salary on October 12, 2004, Faithwords published Joel Osteen's first book, Your Best Life Now: 7 Steps to Living at Your Full Potential. It stayed on the New York Times self-help bestseller list for more than 2 years and sold over 8 million copies worldwide. Almost overnight, Joel went from Houston pastor to national figure. In October 2007, his second book, Become a Better You, was released by Simon & Schuster's Free Press imprint. Some sources reported a $13 million advance. The first printing reached 4 million copies, and the book debuted at #1. Altogether, Joel produced 7 #1 New York Times bestsellers and published more than 25 books. He reportedly earned about $50,000 per outside speaking event. His broadcasts reached more than 200 U.S. markets and over 100 countries. Online, he had 30 million Facebook followers, 10 million on X, and 3.6 million YouTube subscribers. In 2005, Joel announced he would stop taking his $200,000 salary from Lakewood Church. He said he would live on book royalties, speaking fees, and other ventures. In 2013, he told the Christian Post, "My dream was always to serve in the ministry without taking a salary." His supporters admired that decision. His critics saw it differently. Joel's net worth has been estimated at around $100 million, though Snopes notes that such figures lack verifiable public sources. His real estate, however, is easier to confirm. In 2010, Joel and Victoria bought a 17,000-square-foot mansion in Houston's River Oaks for $10.5 million. The home includes 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 3 elevators, 5 fireplaces, a guest house, and a pool. Its current value is estimated between $14 and $16 million, with annual property taxes around $260,000. They also kept their former Tanglewood home, valued at about $2.9 million. Meanwhile, Lakewood's financial transparency raised questions. Ministry Watch gave the church an F for financial transparency and a donor confidence score of 3 out of 100. As a church, Lakewood is not legally required to disclose its finances. According to the Houston Chronicle and Financial Times, less than 1.5% of Lakewood's budget went to charitable work. In fiscal year 2017, that meant about $1.2 million out of $89 million in revenue. Joel never directly answered those numbers. He just kept smiling. But 3 men were waiting for him, 3 enemies and a stain on an armrest. The first major critic was Michael Horton, a theology professor at Westminster Seminary, California. On October 14, 2007, during a 12-minute, 60-minute segment on CBS, Horton called Joel Osteen's message a cotton candy gospel. He reduced Lakewood's teaching to 3 lines. God is nice, you're nice, be nice. Then he called it heresy. The second was John MacArthur, pastor of Grace Community Church. He went even further, calling Joel a pagan religionist in every sense, and comparing his ministry to a Ponzi scheme. He mocked Your Best Life Now, saying that message would only be true for someone on their way to hell. The third was Hank Hanegraaff, president of the Christian Research Institute. In 2014, he published The Osteenification of American Christianity, portraying Joel as the symbol of a faith that had turned God into a tool for personal gain. His verdict was simple: polished, attractive, and hollow. Joel also faced backlash after appearing on Larry King Live on June 20, 2005. When asked whether non-Christians, such as Jews and Muslims, were condemned, Joel said he did not know. After a caller challenged him on the Bible's claim that Jesus is the only way, Joel posted a public apology 5 days later, saying he had never meant to question his own beliefs. While theologians attacked Joel, Victoria Osteen faced her own scandal. On December 19, 2005, she boarded a Continental Airlines first-class flight from Houston to Vail. According to the FAA report, she noticed a liquid stain on her seat's armrest and demanded it be cleaned. Flight attendant Sharon Brown said Victoria became aggressive, shook her sunglasses in her face, pushed her near the cockpit door, and elbowed her in the left breast. Another flight attendant later supported Brown's account. The flight was delayed 2.5 hours. The FAA fined Victoria $3,000. Sharon Brown sued, demanding an apology and damages equal to 10% of Victoria's net worth. She claimed she suffered depression, PTSD, and anxiety, calling Victoria the devil and Lakewood a cult. The trial began in August 2008. Joel called the incident a misunderstanding. A key moment came when a former Continental flight attendant testified that Brown had made a similar false assault accusation in 1995. On August 13, 2008, after less than 3 hours of deliberation, the jury ruled in Victoria's favor. Jury foreman Gillis Lab called it a complete waste of time. Victoria cried after the verdict. Joel smiled. But the real storms had not yet arrived. 3 storms in a decade. The first storm was literal. On August 26, 2017, Hurricane Harvey hit Houston. Some areas received more than 60 inches of rain, a record in U.S. history, and the disaster became one of the costliest the country had ever seen. On Sunday morning, August 27th, Lakewood posted on Facebook that the church was inaccessible because of severe flooding and directed people to other shelters. But residents were already outside the church. They took photos and videos showing the building looking dry and reachable. Writer Charles Clymer shared the images. Economic policy expert Mark Elliott pointed out that Joel Osteen had a net worth of more than $50 million and a church that could hold 16,800 people. By Monday evening, the backlash had become a full crisis. Lakewood posted photos of flooding in the parking garage and said the church had been badly flooded in 2001, so floodgates had been activated again. On Tuesday, August 29th, Lakewood opened as a shelter. About 300 people came, along with hundreds of volunteers. But Joel had already lost the public relations battle. He appeared on CBS This Morning, Today, and CNN. But some of his explanations only made things worse. Meanwhile, Houston had found another hero. Jim Mattress Mac Mackingvale opened his furniture stores to evacuees from the start and used his trucks to rescue stranded families. Tyler Perry donated $1 million to Harvey relief, including $250,000 to Lakewood, and defended Joel. But the public's hero was not Joel Osteen. The second storm had begun years earlier. On March 9, 2014, Lakewood reported that about $600,000 had been stolen from the church safe, including $200,000 in cash and $400,000 in checks. The money came from donations collected during services on March 8th and 9th. Crime Stoppers Houston offered a $25,000 reward. The money was insured and Lakewood collected. No one was arrested. 7 years later, on November 10, 2021, plumber Justin Cawley was repairing a loose toilet in a public single-use restroom at Lakewood. When he removed tile and pushed aside insulation, about 500 envelopes fell out of the wall. The envelopes contained cash, checks, and money orders. Houston police confirmed that evidence on the checks linked the discovery to the 2014 theft. Lakewood executive Don Iloff said someone may have hidden the money above the restroom ceiling, planning to return later, only for it to fall inside the wall. At the time of the theft, there were no security cameras near the bathrooms. The statute of limitations had expired. No one was charged. On December 7, 2021, Crime Stoppers paid Cawley $20,000, the same reward money Lakewood had donated 7 years earlier. The exact amount recovered was never made public. The third storm came from the federal government. During the pandemic shutdown from March 15 to October 18, 2020, Lakewood received a $4.4 million Paycheck Protection Program loan through Bank of America. It was the third largest PPP loan in the Houston area. When the Houston Chronicle reported it in December 2020, the hashtag #TaxTheChurches trended on Twitter. Many questioned why a church as large and wealthy as Lakewood needed relief money. Don Iloff said the funds were used to keep paying full salaries and health benefits for Lakewood's 368 employees. But the criticism continued. Eventually, Lakewood announced it would repay the entire $4.4 million instead of seeking forgiveness. Joel survived every storm. Each time, his smile shook, but it did not fade. Until one Sunday afternoon in 2024. 1:53 in the afternoon, Janesse Yvonne Moreno was born on August 21, 1987, in Conroe, Texas. By February 11, 2024, she had nearly 20 years of criminal history. From 2005 to 2022, Moreno was arrested multiple times on charges including failing to stop and give information, assaulting a public servant, forgery, marijuana possession, theft, evading arrest, and unlawfully carrying a weapon. In 2016, the same year her son Samuel was born, Houston police placed her under emergency detention for mental health reasons. Neighbors in Conroe called the police nearly 24 times over 4 years, reporting harassment, threats, and one incident in which Moreno allegedly tried to hit a neighbor with her car. A 2025 Houston Chronicle investigation recorded more than 50 encounters between Moreno and police, family courts, and child welfare workers. The system had many chances to intervene, but it failed to do so. In December 2023, Moreno legally purchased an AR-15 style rifle. Texas has no red flag law, but her target was not random. According to court documents, Moreno and her mother had once attended Lakewood Church. That relationship seemed to break apart during a 2022 custody battle over her son. Her former mother-in-law, a Jewish rabbi named Wally Carranza, had fought for guardianship of Samuel. She said Moreno had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and Munchausen by proxy, and that she had tried to warn Lakewood about Moreno's instability. In a psychiatric crisis, the feeling of being abandoned by one's own faith community can turn into resentment. That resentment later fused with extremist ideology. On Telegram, Moreno used the name Die Israel. The AR-15 she carried had a Palestine sticker on it. Meanwhile, Joel Osteen and Lakewood had long been openly pro-Israel. To Moreno, the church was no longer just a place that had disappointed her. It had become a political enemy. Posts from January 2024 show that Moreno had been planning the attack for at least a month. On January 3rd, she wrote about targeting a pro-Israel rally. On January 15th, she posted a photo of the rifle with the caption, "In a month, they will be polished." At about 1:50 in the afternoon on February 11, 2024, between the English and Spanish services, Moreno arrived at Lakewood's west entrance. She wore a long coat, brought her son Samuel with her, carried a backpack containing a second rifle, and held the AR-15 with the Palestine sticker. An unarmed security guard tried to stop her. Moreno threatened him, moved into the west hallway, and opened fire. 2 off-duty officers working church security responded immediately. One was Houston police officer Christopher Moreno. The other was Texas ABC agent Adrienne Herrera. They returned fire. Janesse Moreno was shot and killed. She was pronounced dead at 2:07 that afternoon. A 57-year-old man was wounded in the hip and discharged the next day. But the greatest tragedy did not end with the shooter. Samuel Moreno Carranza, only 7 years old, was shot in the head. He was taken to Texas Children's Hospital. Doctors performed 5 brain surgeries, removing part of his frontal lobe and half of the right side of his skull. His heart stopped multiple times. One doctor described the damage in a single sentence: "Sam will never be Sam again." Joel Osteen stood before reporters in shock. He said the church was devastated. Then he added a sentence that many would later call badly timed: "It could have been a lot worse." What remains? 65 years earlier, John Osteen knelt on a manure-stained floor in an abandoned feed store and built the foundation for a 90-person church. 65 years later, his son stood inside a church that had become a fortress. Lakewood closed for 1 week after the shooting. When it reopened, metal detectors stood at every entrance. Armed security now walked the same hallways where gunfire had echoed. Joel Osteen still preached hope and faith, but now behind a hardened security perimeter. The deepest tragedy remained Samuel Moreno Carranza. The 7-year-old boy shot in the head survived, but with permanent damage after doctors removed part of his brain. His grandmother, Rabbi Wally Carranza, launched a GoFundMe campaign, and the world sent hundreds of thousands of dollars. The mercy came from outside the church walls. On the surface, the empire still stands. 45,000 people return every week. Joel's books still sell. His broadcasts still reach 100 countries. His smile is back, perhaps brighter than before, almost like an act of defiance. But that smile now faces questions that will not disappear. Why did a church with $89 million in revenue spend only 1.5% on charity? Why did $600,000 sit inside a bathroom wall for 7 years? Why did one of America's wealthiest pastors need $4.4 million in COVID relief? And why, after more than 50 encounters with the system, did no one stop Janesse Moreno? Joel Osteen taught millions that their best life begins today. But his own life now asks a question his message cannot answer. When the smile finally fades, what remains for the millions who once believed?